Welcome to Sex, Love and Science with Lauren Muratore, clinical psychosexual therapist and relationship expert. This podcast explores sexuality, relationships, and the many facets in between, aiming to normalize sexual conversations, issues that we all face. Let's take the taboo out of sexuality and open up the conversations for a better sexual existence. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting today, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
All right, welcome back to Sex, Love and Science. Now, today's episode is with Laura Leigh, sexologist and a psychologist. And we're going to be talking about sexual communication today, which is a huge topic and it's kind of sprinkled in most of the episodes, but we're just going to do a very big, chunky deep dive into this. Laura, can you tell everyone out there a little bit about yourself? Practice in Geelong?
I do, yes. Thank you so much for having me, by the way. I'm so excited to be here. And this topic of sexual communication, it's such a passion project of mine. I could talk about it every day, so I'm very excited. But yes, I work in beautiful Geelong. I love it down here on the coast. I have a practice here that I've had for a few years as a psychologist where I've seen clients, both individual and relationship therapy. I retrained, I went and did the master's in sexology and retrained a few years ago now. And now a lot of my work is providing sex therapy as well. And I do other bits and pieces. I do quite a bit of training for other healthcare professionals, going and running workshops and doing a bit of case consultation or supervision as well. So, which I love, by the way, because I know that healthcare providers tell me all the time how ill-equipped and how unconfident they feel talking about sex with their clients. So I love doing that kind of work. Yeah, I love helping them feel more confident and competent to raise the issue of sex with their clients because they all want to provide really great sexual health care. They just want to feel more confident to do that. So I love working with healthcare providers too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, it also kind of raises a great point or almost like the ethical question is I don't know about you, but I get a lot of referrals from couples, especially whose psychologists don't work in that area.
Yes.
And while they're comfortable or not comfortable, they don't have the qualifications or they don't have the experience. So that's when they're referred to sex therapists, psychosexual therapists, or sexologists, which I think is quite brilliant and wonderful of the psychology community to go, this is outside of my area of expertise.
Yeah, likewise. That raising awareness of sexology and sex therapy and what that actually involves and how we can actually help and work together is a really important part of the work as well. I love that.
Yeah, no, but it's good to hear that there's, I guess, more information going towards psychologists. Cool. Well, so, all right. So sexual community. So when you're like, because this is your passion project, you say.
Yeah. Yes.
Sexual. I don't know about you, but I get a lot of clients who are like, this is one of their areas that they struggle the most with because they think that they need to have like this big D&M or dialogue during sex, and I'm like, that's not what sexual communication is. Like, tell me what you find.
Yeah. So what got me originally interested in sexual communication was I kept finding it coming up in my clinical practice, like for my clients, as it just seemed to be such a fraught topic. People seemed so anxious about it. And it seemed to be for a lot of people I was seeing, a real communication black spot in a relationship that maybe otherwise had quite good communication. Sex was this topic that was kind of skirted around. And that got me really curious about two things. I got really curious about why that is. And then I got really curious about like why it's so important, because I think we all bang on about sexual communication, but I really wanted to understand why it's so important. So the first part of that was I was really curious about like why it's such a fraught topic for people. And I actually did a research. I can't remember if we've talked about this before, Lauren, but I did a research paper that was published in the Journal of Positive Sexuality last year. And that looked at all of this stuff, that really deep dive into like how sexual communication impacts our sexual functioning. So that was really cool. But before I get to that, I really wanted to understand why sexual communication was so difficult for people. And I found a couple of things. One is that it's a learnt skill. and none of us are really taught how to talk about sex. I certainly wasn't. I was actively discouraged from talking about sex growing up. That's my memories. I remember being actively discouraged by my parents from talking about it. So talking about sex is a learnt skill that most people aren't taught when they go and have sex. So there's that. And that's in the context of what we know is a really sex negative culture. So all of that is happening at a kind of systemic and cultural level. And then at an individual level, you've got all our own stuff that we bring to sex, which is usually things like there's usually shame stuff somewhere near it for a lot of people. And there's often things like things that make the conversation really high stakes. If I'm going to have to imagine talking about sex with my partner, like fear of rejection, judgment, abandonment, hurting this person I care about. So you take all of those combination of factors, and I really started to understand, like, wow, this is a topic that people feel very afraid of, even in a loving, safe relationship. It feels very high stakes, very risky to bring it up. And that's what really initially got me curious about this topic of sexual communication.
Yeah. And look, I would agree with you. Like couples who do have really great communication, sex is usually, their blind spot.
Yes.
And I would say, like, if I really had to put a number, I would almost say 9 times out of 10, there's a shame. I mean, almost even 10 times out of 10, it's really just comes down to the shame. And, you know, interesting that, you know, you highlighted we don't have the education. We don't really, I mean, I think, you know, diving into that further, it really is from that cultural aspect is, you know, our generation before that, we didn't talk about sex. The generation before that, what did sex look like and what did the gender disparity look like and gender roles. And so it's interesting. Do you think, I'm going to go on a little tangent here, but do you think now that sex is slightly being educated more, do you think future generations will be a little bit more equipped to talk about sex? Or do you think how far away do you think that could be?
Unfortunately, I think we're a way off. And there's a couple of reasons that I think that I still hear and feel the discomfort from my own clients. And a lot of my clients are people a little bit younger than me. I'm in my 40s, and a lot of my clients are sort of in their 20s and 30s. And I'm not hearing and seeing the shifts that I might have anecdotally expected to see from younger adults. So I think that pace of change is slow. And the other point I was going to make about that is I look at what's happening kind of, you know, geopolitically, globally, broadly, that there are some shifts happening that are not moving us in a positive direction when it comes to sex and sex education. And then I even think about day to day the fact, I mean, you would well know this, the fact I can't even like write the word sex when I promote work on social media.
Let's not go there. I would irate for 2 hours on that. So.
I know.
I'm going to zip my lips. Sorry.
Yes, I totally understand. So when I look at that, like, I know we're laughing about it, but I also know I know we both know how frustrating that is, but it's also a very stark reminder of, like, we can't even talk about healthcare and our work, evidence-based work. We can't even have that conversation for fear of being obviously, you know, censored, shut down. So when I look at that, I go, no wonder people are still getting this message that, like, this topic is still a little bit not okay. That's the message young people are getting. This is still really not okay for me to talk about. And that's why I think the pace is slow, too slow for change.
Yeah. No, I mean, those are some good points that you raised. You know, I'd agree. I guess I'd also offer the perspective of, though, that, like, I find the younger people that I work with are coming in, though, with more knowledge and more skills and actually more curiosity. So they're bringing curiosity to the table, and they're wanting to make change, which I find incredibly inspiring.
Yes.
And hopeful, because they're really they're breaking away from the I guess maybe my generation, I'm in my 40s,
Mm.
or even the one above me. And they're really kind of looking at things going, hey, we know if we're carrying shame, we can see the future, or we see ahead of us and everything that kind of everybody else effed up, right? And we're wanting to do something. We don't want that. So I guess that's just another perspective of
Yes.
younger people that I work with.
I think that your point about the presence of curiosity is such an important one. And I definitely agree that more curiosity is key to the shift that we want to make here. Like, it's key to the conversations we have in our interpersonal relationships. So even the one-on-one communication I might have with my partner about sex, if I can bring curiosity to that, that's going to dramatically change the trajectory of the conversation I'm having in that relationship. So the presence of curiosity, like what you're seeing in some of your younger clients, I agree, is probably one of the most hopeful signs that I could think of when it comes to the possibility of change.
Yeah. And I guess, I don't know, this is another theory that I have that I really have nothing to base it on, but I guess my theory is like, as fear and and repression and censorship, like they kind of like keeps piling on until it can't and it pops. And then there's some sort of revolution. That's when the change occurs. So if we look historically about LGBTQ rights and women and so everything kind of like got really, really repressed, and then it popped and people gained more rights. So this is my theory, is that's what's happening now. And we are going to eventually pop within the next, I don't know, Trump administration, and things are going to escalate even more forward. Just my random theory.
I mean, that I find that very exciting, Lauren. That fills me with hope. I love that. I love this theory, and it makes sense to me as you're saying it to me. That's the most hopeful I've felt in a while, I think. So I appreciate that. Thanks, Lauren.
Yeah. No, that's okay. That's like the position I work from, because I'm going to continue advocating, and I'm going to make this bubble pop. And if we all make this bubble pop, we're going to push things so far forward that it's going to blow people's effing minds.
Absolutely. Yes. I love that. I love this. This is very hopeful. And I do see this. Like because I really agree with your theory. Like I think this is a very interesting point in time when it comes to kind of sexuality, sexual healthcare and sexual healthcare rights and advocacy. I think this is a very interesting time.
Yeah, and especially like how, and I guess we'll tie this back into sexual communication, but I mean, it does relate, because what people are doing now is they're kind of like whistleblowers. They're like, this is not okay. Like the manosphere, that's not okay. And here is all the reasons why and what happens. And then it kind of goes into like mainstream TV, right? To kind of like start talking about it. Or here's domestic violence, and here's, sexual assault or the, violence against women. And so things keep getting, no, this is not okay. And it's in everybody's faces that what is not okay.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's tie that to sexual communication. Like, so as you were saying, like, people are kind of getting censored information, but we're also getting what's okay. Do you think that people are finding sex confusing because there's so many mixed messages?
Yes. So yes, I do. And I think there's so many mixed messages about all the different things that go into sex, like some of the things you were just alluding to there, actually, things like gender roles, things like the sociocultural context and point of time that we are in. There's also been this really interesting move towards pleasure, particularly women's pleasure, as a focus of sexuality, which has created this very interesting paradigm shift around sex for pleasure. And as we know, most of the sex that is had in the world every day is not for reproduction. It's mostly for other reasons, a lot of which is pleasure. So this paradigm shift of sex as a pursuit of pleasure and something to really luxuriate in and explore, like this is a really exciting, expansive view of sexuality. And that is exciting to be a part of. and I was going to say but, it's not really a but, and creates some new challenges for communication. Like just, it's a whole new way of thinking about sex and a whole new way of kind of trying to explore it and talk about it, which is exciting and expansive and scary and fraught, all the things.
That's such an excellent point, because it's like kind of like that light switch where it's like, it's not okay. Hey, it is okay. And oh my God, we're going to now focus on pleasure. But what does that mean? Like, how do I do that? And people not having the tools or the knowledge to be pleasure focused, and then to feel confident about pleasure, because I don't know about you, but I see a lot of people internalize, I'm not good at pleasing, or my body's not responding in a way that I believe it should. So therefore I might not be good at pleasure.
Yes. I might not be good at it. Exactly. Which makes sense. Like, it makes sense to me that I might not be good at it shows up here, because the way that sex has been commodified and viewed through the lens of the systems it exists within, like capitalism, like patriarchy, means that it has become this really performance-based thing to do. Like, it's really easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves sexually. So how am I performing sex? Am I good or bad at it? Good or bad? And do I want it the right amount? And am I having it the right amount? There's lots of like performance metrics that you can accidentally apply to sex really easily if we're not careful. So the fact that pleasure has become yet another thing for us to go, am I doing this right? It actually doesn't surprise me, because there's so much of that comparison and performance-based approach to the way that we talk about sex culturally already anyway. And pleasure, like the paradigm shift towards pleasure and exploration, it doesn't really it doesn't want that. It doesn't want us to do that. So that's really unfamiliar territory to be like, wait, how will I know if I'm doing it right then? Like that's, like, how will I know if I'm getting it right and if I'm doing this well? Like that's such a shift for people.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. So I guess like when, you're passionate about sexual communication, what you're alluding to is talking about sex, like the context, right? So not in the bedroom, and just kind of, but do you also do a lot of skills and tools of sexual communication during the act?
Yeah, definitely. Because sexual communication is really broad. I mean, sexual communication encompasses all the ways that we communicate verbally and non-verbally about everything to do with sex, including our preferences, desires, wants, limits, boundaries, feelings, experiences, like all of that comes into sexual communication. And I would also say that it's really about how we nurture the sexual part of ourselves and our relationships. So it's very, very broad. And I think when people have traditionally thought about sexual communication, they've kind of imagined, as you were saying earlier, a D&M, a sitting down, a like looking at each other and being like, we need to talk about our sex life, which is so frightening. Like that makes me feel anxious just to imagine, right? Whereas actually what I found in my research was that the couples who reported having what they appraised to be excellent sexual communication, it didn't really encompass necessarily a lot of those like big, deep, heavy conversations. It was more about how do we engage verbally and non-verbally on a sexual basis or on a sexual level, ongoing, like in a long-term relationship, maybe even daily. But it's just about how do we kind of visit that sexual part of our connection and exchange information about our sexual feelings, preferences, experiences, boundaries, all of those things I said before. How do we exchange that information in a way that establishes this is a safe topic between us? And what was really cool about that was that could be found regardless of relationship status. So I even work with people who want to establish great sexual communication with casual partners, maybe even someone they've met that day. And that is entirely possible as well. I can connect with someone today and we can establish a sense of security and safety between us where it's clear that this person cares about my experience, wants me to have a good time, cares about my boundaries and limits, wants to give and receive feedback. That can be actually established relatively quickly and easily, and we can still have a highly communicative sexual encounter. So that was the really cool thing about what I found about sexual communication, was how kind of fluid and free flowing it could be.
Yeah, and good point, because I think that's important for people out there to think about, because most people, when they hear about sexual communication, my I guess assumption is most people go to, well, this is happening in a long term.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, no, this could be for somebody who's super attractive and you pick up at the bus stop, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Which I love.
Absolutely.
The other thing I guess I heard you say is like this is what I kind of took from what you were saying, is that the sexual communication, that the higher satisfaction couples, it's almost as simple as like how people say, hey, how's your day?
Yeah.
Like it's a comfortability of just being able to talk about your day and what happened as just sex. And that's kind of the ease of, I guess, conversing about it.
Yes.
And people who can do that have, I guess, greater sexual satisfaction. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that was what my research found, because as I said before, I feel like anecdotally we would all kind of expect that better sexual communication leads to better sex or more sexual satisfaction. I felt like anecdotally that was a pretty safe assumption, but I was really curious when I was doing my research to understand how exactly is sexual communication facilitating greater satisfaction. And that was what we found, was that the reason sexual communication impacts positively both desire and sexual satisfaction was this kind of multi-directional relationship where the people who are having really effective sexual communication are more likely to get what they want from sex, and they also feel more confident that they're going to get from what they want from sex. Therefore, their sexual satisfaction is greater, and therefore also their sexual desire tends to be higher, because it's much easier to want something that's really fun and a good time, right? So if I'm anticipating sex to be pleasurable, that's easier to want. That is easier to want. So sexual communication played a role in really lifting people's reported rates of desire and satisfaction. And in fact, the research I was looking at even said that I even found a few studies that suggested that for people with vulvas, they were more likely to report higher intensity and frequency of orgasm if they were having greater communication about sex with their partners, which is so interesting to me. So I also think it's really motivating to have more conversations about sex if I'm more likely to get the sex that I want. The other thing that was super interesting about sexual communication is that the couples, as we were talking about before, making it part of your daily interaction, the couples that do it more frequently laid the foundation for this being a safer topic. And, all the things I was saying before that make talking about sex high stakes, all that fear and anxiety and all the shame stuff we talked about that before, you lower the stakes, you lower the risk of that when it's a topic you visit daily, so that if and when the time comes where you do have to have maybe a harder or heavier conversation about sex, you've already established this is a safe place for me to go. Like, this is a safe topic, and you've laid that foundation for this to be okay to talk about when it's harder to talk about.
Yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And I guess, what I'm kind of hearing from that too is it's just some really great kind of couples work, right? So whether we're talking about sex or another topic, I mean, what I'm hearing is really being able to understand one another and accept it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you don't understand somebody's sexual position and not sexual position, but, how they feel about sex, what is their position on sex, the importance, the meaning,
yes.
And also that acceptance, like somebody can say, oh, I would like to try X, and it might be too extreme for the other person, that's still safe and okay. So a level of acceptance is really needed to, I guess, circumnavigate rejection.
Yeah.
So do you find... So where would a couple start from your perspective?
Yeah, I think so. A couple of things that I always give my clients as starting points. If the first thing I would say is, if this is a new topic for you, particularly in a relationship where you've never talked about sex or haven't talked about it in a while, that first conversation is simply checking for willingness and openness from your partner that they even want to talk about sex more. That first conversation, we're not not raising issues. We're not solving problems. We're just saying, hey, I was thinking, or I was listening to this podcast. I love to use external resources. I was reading this article. I was listening to this podcast about sex. And even though I feel really nervous, even though this is super awkward for me to bring up, it does occur to me that I'd like to have a lot of sex in my life, or I'd like to have sex with you for a really long time to come. And it occurs to me that it would be great for us to talk about it sometimes to make sure we're both happy and on the same page. What do you think? Are you up for that? And just checking for that willingness and openness first, leaning into the likely awkwardness. As I said before, it's a learnt skill to talk about sex, and anything you do for the first few times, you're not going to be great at it. So often couples that I see come to me concerned that like the quality of the conversation isn't great, or they're like nervous, or they say to me, we always end up laughing about sex. Like we always end up making a joke. And I'm like, good, keep going. Number one, it's allowed to be fun. Like that's actually okay. And number two, the awkwardness, keep going. Just keep going through it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I promote fun and
yeah.
Why would you want sex to be so like, I guess, so serious and like, like very rigid? It's just like, It can be funny. It can, like, why not have a laugh?
Yes, exactly. So that's why one of my other big tips around sexual communication to inject some fun is that you're actually allowed to gamify it a bit. There are so many excellent resources out there, yes, no, maybe lists and card games with questions and things like that. You're allowed to use external tools. And I'm actually a huge fan of using external resources to exchange information. One of the things my partner does, right? He has ADHD, and he'll send me like funny memes about ADHD and be like, haha, this is me. And I'm like, yes, it is. That's what it's like to live with you, right? And we joke. But when he's doing that, I know what he's doing is saying like, can you see me? Like, this is my experience. This is how I live. This is my experience. I want you to see me and know me. And when I get that, meme from him and I laugh about it, I also respond with warmth because I'm saying, yes, I see you and you're okay as you are. So using all sorts of external resources are still really powerful ways to see each other and exchange information. So I'm a huge fan of, sharing podcasts, sharing articles, memes, reels, games. Watching a show together is a great way to introduce it. If you, rather than sitting down and saying to your partner, for example, I would like us to have a threesome. Can we have a threesome? Which is a very confronting statement to say to your partner if you're in an otherwise monogamous relationship. But watching a show together where there is maybe a threesome depicted and saying, have you ever done that? Would you want to do that? Are you curious about that? I kind of think that's hot. What do you think? Is such a lovely way to communicate in a open, explorative way. The conversation then becomes a discussion rather than a confession. And it's just a beautiful exploration of a topic. So there are loads of ways that you can make this conversation lower stakes, turn the heat down on it, and more fun and more explorative, which brings me, I guess, to the final tip, circles back to what you said before, curiosity. Curiosity is my biggest tip. Genuine curiosity that even if your partner says something that feels very left field and confronting to you and you're thinking, oh my God, I don't know what to say to that, meet them with curiosity. Find a question you can ask in that moment. Even if you notice your own reaction coming up in your body that is like, oh my God, is that what they want to do? I don't want to do that. What are we going to do if they want to do that? Meet them with curiosity. It's a beautiful way to explore and open up the dialogue rather than close it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, that's really the antithesis of judging, and it just keeps an opening. So I do a lot of that too.
Yeah.
I mean, and I liked your example of what you and your partner do. But I guess what I took away too from that is, the seeing. Absolutely. I think that's really important, especially in when we're talking about sexual communication. But you also are positively validating.
Yes.
Him, right? Oh, that. Sorry.
No, him. That's okay. Him. Yes.
Yeah. And so when you're positively validating somebody, or giving them positive reinforcement, like that keeps the door open for curiosity. That keeps the door open for everything that you've said, because as soon as you negatively reinforce somebody, like ew, or that's weird, or, like watching a threesome, oh, I would never do that if that's what you want to do, right? It kind of shuts people down.
Yeah.
And so what I do is a lot of like ensuring that people are putting positives first, even if it's something that they don't like or want, like, hey, that feels good, or I'd be open to trying that. This might be my boundary, or right, like just always putting, because I think it really kind of reinforces that being seen.
Yes.
And
yeah,
curiosity.
absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have any other like, because it's hard for people to get their head around curiosity, right?
Yeah.
It really is. So that's one way I kind of get clients to start engaging with curiosity, or just writing a list of questions and feeling safe and comfortable to ask them. But I mean, do you have any other tips that people might be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Curiosity?
I love to give people some really practical scripts to use for both curiosity alongside validation, because I feel like validation is also one of those terms that people hear and maybe it feels a bit abstract, or they're not sure exactly how to use it in practice. But validation is really powerful. Validating what someone has just said or their experience or their feelings, is not agreeing with it. And I think sometimes people feel concerned that if I validate my partner, I might be agreeing with what they're saying, and I might not want to agree with what they're saying. And I want to be clear that validation is not agreement, but it is a way of just saying to someone, I hear your experience, and I have understood what you're saying. So I love to work with people with actual practical scripts. One thing that I've had said to me once, I remember, well, it was only a little while ago now, I went to my partner with with an issue that I was really anxious to bring to him. I was very heightened. I can be a bit avoidant, Lauren. So I was like very anxious to go to him, and I could think of a million things I would rather have done than raise this issue with him. And I went to him in this like anxious, heightened state to talk to him about something. And he responded so beautifully. He said, and I've never forgotten it, he said, I can see that was really hard for you to say to me. Thank you for telling me.
Oh,
you can imagine what that did for my nervous system. Even as I'm telling you, I can remember the flood of like relief that went through me when he said that to me. I feel like it's making me emotional now. It still makes me emotional to think about, because it was you can imagine I was in such a heightened state, and it was this flood of relief, like, this is okay. I'm okay. And you can imagine how that changes the trajectory of the conversation, rather than if he'd responded with defensiveness or irritation or anger, and we would have just gotten more and more heightened in us and escalated. Instead, his very validating response of, I can see that was hard for you. Thank you for telling me, totally just soothed my entire body. And that, of course, creates so much more openness in the conversation. There's so many more places to go, so much more room, rather than if he had gotten annoyed or upset. So these kinds of validating statements like, thank you for telling me, or I feel like I understand you more now that you've told me that, or, you know what, that makes sense to me. Now that you've kind of explained that to me, that makes sense why you're upset or anxious or angry. Like, I totally get that now. These are the kinds of validating statements I get people to practice, not just because validation is like a nice thing to do, but because, as you can hear in the example I just shared, it totally takes the heat out. It completely transforms the trajectory of that conversation.
Oh, that is such a beautiful personal example.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Really beautiful example.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
Wow. Kudos to your partner, and good on you both. Wow.
Oh, he's the best.
Role model relationships. Yeah.
We work very, very hard at this stuff. Like, and of course we get it wrong plenty as well. Like, we mess it up and make mistakes all the time, but we practice this stuff, and we try our best, and we're very intentional. Like, these strategies that I talk about here are really important to talk about proactively in your relationship. Like, to talk about, hey, I've noticed sometimes we actually move towards defensiveness when we're having emotional conversations. And I think maybe we could try some of this validation and curiosity stuff. What do you think? Should we try that together? Like, you don't have to try this stuff like in secret. We're allowed to kind of say to our partner, let's try this like openly, let's commit to this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I guess I can talk about the other side of the scale, which is from a casual perspective, right? Because you don't know somebody or you don't know them very well, or it is a casual kind of setup. From my personal experience, but also from, I guess, anecdotally, it's the more confident you are. And if somebody else is in that anxious state, the more confident you can be and validate somebody, or, hey, how's this feeling? Or I'd like to try this. How do you feel about that? Or, tell me some things that you like. Is you kind of are leading the way, and that puts somebody else at ease if they're not so confident. And so even in that casual encounter, it kind of does exactly what you said, is it brings their system down.
Yeah.
You go, okay, cool. This is a freeing place. Let's try. Let's go for this. And that could be, and it's really kind of nice to see that space can also work, right? You don't have to know the person super, super well for a long time to apply exactly what you just said.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. And some of those things we've been talking about today, like, does this person give me an indication that they are curious about me, or that they care about me having a good time, or that they are respectful? They are things that you can assess fairly quickly and easily. Like, you can get a lot of cues that indicate one way or the other if that's what this person's going to be about.
Exactly. And then if they're not respectful, it's then providing the tools to clients to say, hey, this is how you get out of that situation.
Yes. That's that's an excellent point. Absolutely. Having some really good language to go, I'm actually going to step away from this. That's really powerful. I can think of many times, even in my own life, where I haven't had that language, and how scary that felt when I felt like I don't know how to extricate myself from a situation of some kind. I'm not even just talking sexually, just I don't know how to extricate myself from this. And that's a really yucky feeling. That's not a nice position to be in. So having that language accessible is a lovely skill to build.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we don't want people, because what I see is a lot of people who are having sex or doing things that they don't want to do because they feel like they have to. Like, even especially in casual encounters, or so it's like, oh, I feel obligated to do this because we started. So it's kind of, I always like to shift the power back to the person and the individual, because when you have that confidence, you're making decisions, and you are holding that space for yourself and the other. And if they're not if they're not holding that with you and stepping in, then that's a great cue to go, hey, cool, that this is great, lovely to meet you. It's my bedtime.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Totally agree.
Last question for you. What, for our moment of Zen today, what is one last thing you would leave people with?
The thing that I would really like to leave people with is that communicating about sex, I really want to expand people's definition of that. This is not an exchange of discussing sexual acts and preferences all the time. Think of it more about communicating in a sexual way. So that can be about touch and flirtation and expressing desire, telling someone you think that they look nice, or they smell good, or their hair looks nice, or they look hot today, or you were thinking about that thing you did together last night or last week or last year. Think about this as visiting the sexual part of your connection, no matter how long you've known them, rather than necessarily a big verbal exchange of sexual preferences, acts, desires. Think of this more as a visiting the sexual part of your connection. And I think that can help take the pressure off and bring some fun and flirtation and lightness to this topic.
Oh, absolutely fabulous. Well, thank you for all of your tips, and lovely hearing your research, because I think that's really helpful for people to kind of hear, what the evidence says. So I appreciate coming today.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. This was lovely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laura. And I will put your details in the show notes, and also link to your paper so people can pick up on that if they want.
Great. Thanks, Lauren.
That's all right. We'll see you later, and thank you for tuning in to Sex, Love and Science.